Hi there! In this episode, we're going to get clear on the different publishing options. If you've heard words like traditional publishing, self-publishing, indie publishing, vanity publishing, royalty publishing, all thrown around, we're going to clear that up. Now, I want to give you a caveat because different publishers define some of these in different ways, and you're going to find some crossover. And so I'm going to tell you how I see it, but I'm going to also tell you that you're going to hear some other people who define it slightly different. Now, you're also going to hear some people who say you should never, ever pay to publish a book. And I'm sorry, I know that there are some very wonderful people who say that you should never have to pay to publish a book. And that is true in the traditional realm. But when we get into the indie realm, we are the business owner. And so we are going to be investing some money. It is going to cost something to publish a book. So if I'm going to do it myself, it's going to cost. Now, I think what they're trying to say is that you should not pay $10,000 or $15,000 or $20,000 for some company to publish your book. Because I will tell you that when you're publishing your book, you need to pay for certain services, but those services don't cost $10,000. If you're hiring a ghostwriter to write your book for you, yes. But if you're doing the writing and you're just needing somebody to edit your book, help you get your cover done, help you do your ebook, get the interior of your print book done, and get it up there and published, it is not going to cost you $10,000. It might, if you're somebody who says, I don't want to have to do any of it, I want somebody to do all of it for me. But we are here to talk about indie authors. But before we do that, we have to understand what the other options are, because I can't define an indie author without telling you what the other options are. So I'm going to divide this into two things. I'm going to say traditional publishing, and I'm going to go into this in detail in a second. We're going to be talking about a large press and a small press in traditional publishing. And then I'm going to talk about self-publishing, and I'm going to talk about assisted and independent, or we shorten that to indie. Now, here's why I define it this way. There are a lot of versions out there of self-publishing, and so I'm going to help you narrow that down and understand what we're talking about. Now, before we do that, let's talk about traditional, which is also called royalty publishing. In this scenario, the publisher pays the author a small advance. Now, there are some small presses that don't pay much of an advance, but most of the time, that's the case. And they pay for the publishing costs and some of the marketing. Don't get into the scenario of thinking that you're never going to pay for any marketing, because you're going to have to work your tail off no matter which way you publish your book. You're in charge of the marketing. You have to take care of getting the word out there, and it's your platform that you're doing that on. Now, with traditional publishing, the publisher begins paying the author a portion of the royalties for the book after the sales have earned out the cost of publishing. If this never happens, they never send you a royalty check. Because here's how it works. If they give you a small advance and they say, we're going to give you some money because you worked on writing this book, and then we're going to spend a lot of money. We're going to hire people that work on our team who are going to do all the stuff. And they might have to pay a lot of salary and taxes for those people. And they might be running a company with a building they have to pay for and all of that. And so there's some overhead in publishing that book. And so let's go with $10,000. Let's say they invest that much money in publishing your book. This publisher is taking on all the risk of you as an author, and they're hoping that you're going to have a big enough platform of followers and enough opportunities to sell books. And so they're hoping you're going to earn back everything they invested and more. And so this is why they get a big chunk of your royalties. They have to pay back everything they did. They edit, they proofread, and they do more rounds than we do when we do it ourselves. They do many, many rounds of editing, proofreading, typesetting, printing, binding, cover art, design, promotion, advertising, warehousing your books, shipping, billing, paying author royalties, all those things. So any publisher who claims to be a traditional publisher but asks for money from you is actually not a traditional publisher. And that's why some people say you should not be paying money to publish your books. Because if you're going to a big name company and they're wanting you to pay some money, that's not truly a traditional publisher. Now, this process of getting a book published involves submitting a proposal, likely through an agent, and it might take a really long time to find a publisher, if ever. That agent's going to help you revise your book. You're going to submit it different places, and it's going to come back to you, and you're going to make changes and all those things. It's a long process, and that's how it should be because they're investing a lot of money in you. Now, I said I was going to break this into large press and small press, and I want to do that because this is helpful. A large press is a big name publisher or an imprint of one. An imprint is like another division of it. So you might have Penguin Random House, but they've got all these little imprints of their children's one, and they might have a Christian publishing branch, and they might have their nonfiction or their textbooks or whatever. So there used to be a big 6, now it's big 5. It's Penguin Random House, HarperCollins, Simon & Schuster, Hachette Book Company, and Macmillan are kind of the big ones. And the publishing imprint then is another division. So like I said, Penguin Random House has Penguin books, Writer's Digest books, Bantam books. You might recognize some of those, but those are under that bigger one. Now, a small press is an independent publishing house that has a fully staffed publishing team like editors, proofreaders, designers, typesetters, but they run a smaller operation than the big name publishers. So you might not even recognize their name, but they still are traditional publishers in that they're not asking for a dime from you. They're asking for you to have a great book that's going to sell a lot of copies. All right, so that's a really quick summary of traditional royalty publishing. Now let's talk about self-publishing or indie publishing. And this is where you're going to have people who define it in different ways. Self-publishing or independent publishing is a setup where the author pays for all or most of the publishing and either uses a hybrid indie publishing company that does the publishing work and puts the book in their catalog, and yet you're paying for part of it. So that's kind of where the hybrid comes in. They're sort of acting like a traditional publisher, but they're asking you to help fund it. So that's the hybrid. Or the second one is the author becomes their own publisher by independently managing every step of the process, setting up their own imprint, hiring contractors to do the editing and design, setting up the book on a distribution platform themselves. Now let's go into just a little more detail on those two options because it's important to understand when someone says self-publishing or indie publishing, it can mean a lot of things. It can mean that you're working with a company. And so let's go with that first, option A, which would be the indie publishing company. They are the hybrid model. This is where you're paying for all or most of the cost of the publishing, but the company is taking care of the process for you. You're submitting your book. They might even want you to have a full proposal, and they might be very limited in what they're willing to publish, but they're going to do a lot, like almost all of the work for you. So you're going to have an experience that's kind of similar to traditional publishing. However, there's a couple things you need to know and to watch out for. Number one, some are predators and you have to choose wisely. Some of them have ginormous price tags and they're not producing things that are of quality to stand up against traditionally published books. And so, yes, they could do it all for you and make it feel like a really fun process, but you're going to spend more than you'd spend on a new car in order to get that done. And so you have to be very careful. Now, with a good one, they're going to take your input and you're going to make a lot of the decisions, but their team's going to handle the business side of getting your book published. And they're going to give you a lot of input on the cover design and probably the title. And they're going to take care of making the ebook for you and registering the ISBN and adding a barcode and setting up what's called metadata for your book. We're going to get into that in another episode. They're going to get it out there to online retailers and make it available to order. And they might be called a hybrid publisher when they do that work. That's very similar to the traditional publisher. But the way it's managed and funded is controlled by the author instead of the publisher. And one of the things that the sneakier ones do, and I'm saying this because I don't want you to fall into this, is they will try to tell you they're a traditional publisher, and then they will talk about how much money you're going to spend. It is a hybrid self-publishing company if they're asking for $1 from you, from anything from you, okay? So remember that. Now, because this company is doing so much work for you, they're probably keeping a portion of the book sales because they have production costs and they might be keeping it in their catalog. If that's the case, they're gonna have it spelled out in a contract and saying how much money you're keeping, and then they'll give you an agreed upon amount when the books sell. They're also potentially going to give you a really good discount on books when you want to buy them to sell them yourself, or some of them, the discount's not so great. So you have to look at all of those details. They reserve the right to refuse a book that isn't ready, or maybe they see it as like, it's just not the topic that they cover, that they publish, that kind of thing. This process is usually faster than traditional publishing because they accept a lot more manuscripts. They aren't as picky about things because, number one reason, you're absorbing the cost. So they don't have any risk. If you're paying for what it takes to get your book published, they're willing to publish something that might not sell as well because you're assuming the risk. So that's the summary of the hybrid option. Now let's look at option B under self-publishing, and this is the author who acts as the indie publisher. Now this is where, similar to the other self-publishing option, the author pays for all of the costs, but the author also independently manages the entire publishing process. So you're acting in the role of both author and publisher. And so you're not going to see a publisher name on the back of your book. You're going to be that person. You're going to set up a publishing imprint using your business name or your ministry name or a doing business as or something like that, where you're actually setting up the name of your publishing company. You're going to hire your own contractors to edit your book. Yes, you are going to. We're going to be talking about that in Indie Author Blueprint. You're going to hire editors. Raise your right hand and say, I will get my content edited. You are going to hire somebody to design the cover and the interior, and we're going to be talking about that also in future episodes. They will take care of getting the ebook file ready for you. They'll help you through that process. Now, some people, you might be working with a contractor, like what I do with clients, where I can coach them through, or you might have to do DIY that whole process and actually do a lot of research and put together some notes on how to do it. I'm here with Indie Author Blueprint to help you get started with that and send you to some of those resources. And so if you don't even know where to begin and you're not looking to hire somebody right now, I'm going to help you figure out how to get those steps in place if you're starting a business as a writer and publisher. Now, the most important thing when you try to DIY it too much is it can really affect the quality of what happens with the outcome of your book. And so I'm going to be covering that in future episodes. It's so important for quality to be number one, because again, as a good business investor, you want your book to sell. And so it's really important that if you can't do it, or you can't do it up to the standards that would sell on a bookstore shelf next to another book, then you can hire somebody who does that. The author, as the publisher, purchases their own ISBN number, registers it with their publisher name. They take care of getting the book onto Amazon or other platforms like Ingram Spark or Lightning Source. They set up all of the info about the book. They select the pricing and the options. And, it's like they're choosing what size the cover is going to be and if it's hardcover or paperback and all of that. Now, one of the advantages with this process is even though the author is investing all of the money to get that done, the author keeps all of the royalties. That with any sales, whatever portion comes back after Amazon gets their money and the printing is paid for, you keep all of that. And so hopefully, just like a traditional publisher does, you will eventually earn out your investment through sales. And so if you spend, the authors that work with me spend on average around $3,000 from start to finish to hire me for the entire process. And so I'm going to work for, like 100 hours on their book. And in that time, I'm going to be editing and I'm going to be designing the cover and doing the interior and the ebook and all of that. But after that, when they start selling those books, they're getting the profit back and starting to put it back towards what they invested in getting it published. And so after Amazon gets their cut and you take your royalty, eventually you should earn back whatever you invested to get it published, and then it's profit after that. Authors can then purchase books at just the cost of printing the book, which is different than when you have a self-publishing company who says, we'll give it to you for half off the cover price. Well, if your book is $15 and you're paying $7.50 per book, that's quite different than for my books that sell for $15, but I'm only paying like $3.40 to get a copy because all I have to do is pay for the printing. Now, the other thing that's important with all of these models is to consider how that printing happens, and I will cover it in detail in the future. But you will see that traditional or royalty published books are often very reasonably priced and often go on sale. And you wonder, well, how in the world are they able to do that when it cost me $3.40 to print my book? That's because they do what's called offset printing, and they get it done in giant batches overseas, usually in a place where they get a really good discount. And the difference with self-publishing is that we do print on demand. And that means when someone buys the book, it's created and mailed to them. I don't warehouse any books. It costs more to print books that way, but the risk is so much lower because I don't have any more than 20 copies of each of my books on hand in my office at home at any time, because I can always ship some and have them to somebody. And so that's also important to know, that sometimes there are some self-publishing companies that say, we want you to order 4,000 copies of your book or something like that. Be very aware of that, because they're trying to use that as part of a way of having you pay for the publishing process. Okay, so if that all at the end here just kind of went over your head a little bit, is okay. I'm going to cover all of this in detail in more episodes. The point today is for you to have understood the different types of publishing: traditional publishing with large presses and small presses, and self-publishing, whether it's assisted, like a self-publishing company that you go with, or whether it's completely independent. And when it's completely independent, you are what we call an indie author / publisher. You are the author and the publisher all in one. In Indie Author Blueprint, I'm totally targeting the independent author / publisher. If that's you, then stick around, because there are more episodes for you to consume, more information to blow your brain. But beginning, if you haven't done the quiz, I encourage you to go ahead. If you haven't subscribed, and that's free here on Substack, you just need to subscribe, and then you get access in the welcome email to some of the freebies that I have. Go ahead and do the What's Your Profile worksheet. It's like a quiz where you fill it out and add up your score, and it helps you find out if you are more tailored to working towards independent publishing like I'm talking about, or whether you really would be better off having somebody assist you with going with a self-publishing company, or whether you might be suited to pursue traditional publishing. So go ahead and get that resource. That will be there for you. And then in the next episode, I'm going to be going into the variations of self-publishing in a little more detail. So if the things I just talked about at the end here were a little overwhelming, it's okay. We're going to break it down. So go ahead and get the worksheet, and I'll see you next time.